Run your hand along your jaw right now or picture doing it and you'll notice something strange. There's hair there, thick, coarse, deliberate hair. And yet the rest of you, your back, your shoulders, your stomach, is almost bare compared to a chimpanzee or a gorilla. Somewhere in your evolutionary past, your body made a very specific decision. Lose almost everything but keep the beard. Nobody agrees on why. That's the strange part. You'd think something this visible, something half the population grows on purpose every single day, would have an obvious explanation by now. It doesn't. Scientists have been arguing about human hairlessness for over 150 years, and the beard sits right in the middle of that argument as the one piece that refuses to fit neatly into any single theory. Start with the basics. Humans are technically still covered in hair. You have roughly the same density of hair follicles as a chimpanzee. The difference is that most of ours produce a thin, nearly invisible fuzz called vellus hair instead of the thick, pigmented terminal hair that covers most other primates. So the real mystery isn't why humans are hairless. It's why certain patches of the body and only certain patches kept growing the thick stuff: the scalp, the armpits, the groin. And in men, the face. Charles Darwin noticed this puzzle back in the 1870s, and it genuinely bothered him. In The Descent of Man, he couldn't make the standard explanation of the time work. If losing body hair was purely about temperature regulation, about early humans overheating on the African savanna while running down prey, then why would you keep hair on your head where it traps heat and grow a beard on your face, which does nothing useful for cooling at all? Darwin's answer was that the beard wasn't functional in a survival sense. It was decorative. He proposed that beards evolved through sexual selection, the same process that gives peacocks their tails, because at some point in human history, women found bearded men more attractive, or beards signaled something about a man's age, health, or dominance that mattered during mate choice. It's a compelling idea, and a lot of modern researchers still think Darwin was onto something, but it doesn't close the case because there's a second observation that complicates it. If beards were purely about being chosen by women, you'd expect the trait to look the way peacock feathers do, wildly exaggerated for the sake of display and not much else. Instead, human facial hair looks a lot more like something else entirely. It looks like a warning. That idea comes from a different angle of research, one focused less on attraction and more on confrontation. A well-known 2013 study out of the University of New South Wales, led by researcher Barnaby Dixon, found that bearded faces were consistently rated by both men and women as looking more aggressive, more dominant, and more capable of winning a physical fight than clean-shaven faces. The effect got even stronger when the beard was paired with an angry expression. That's a strange result if beards exist purely to attract partners. It starts to look less like a peacock's tail and more like a lion's mane, a signal aimed as much at rival males as at potential mates. So which is it? Is the beard a courtship display or a threat display? Here's the honest answer, and it's one the field has more or less settled into, at least for now. It's probably both, and that's not scientists dodging the question. Sexual selection doesn't only mean attracting a mate. It also covers competition between members of the same sex for access to mates, and a trait that makes you look more dominant to rivals can matter just as much for reproductive success as a trait that makes you look attractive to a partner. A beard that says "don't test me" to another man, and he seems capable to a potential partner is, evolutionarily speaking, doing double duty. But that still leaves the bigger question sitting underneath all of this. Why did the rest of the body lose its hair in the first place, setting up the contrast that makes the beard and the head hair stand out so much? This is where a genuinely influential 2003 paper comes in, from geneticists Mark Pagel and Walter Bodmer. They looked at the standard explanation, the cooling hypothesis, the idea that as early humans became persistence hunters, chasing prey across long distances in the heat, losing fur and gaining sweat glands let them dump heat more efficiently than a furry predator ever could. It's a solid theory, and there's real evidence for it. Humans have somewhere around 2 to 4 million sweat glands, an extraordinary number compared to other primates, and that cooling system does appear to be tied to our endurance running ability. But Pagel and Bodmer pointed out a problem. Other savanna mammals living in the exact same heat, antelope, lions, hyenas, kept their fur. If overheating alone explained hair loss, you'd expect it to show up more often across species facing the same environmental pressure. So they proposed something additional was going on. Nakedness, they argued, may have become attractive in its own right because bare skin makes it much harder to hide a skin condition, a parasite, a rash, anything that might signal poor health. In a highly social species where mate choice actually matters, visible skin could function almost like a health certificate. Under this view, humans didn't just lose hair to cool down. They lost it partly because smoother skin became, over generations, more desirable, and once that preference took hold, it could spread through a population fairly quickly, the same way certain plumage patterns spread through birds. Notice what that theory does. It doesn't compete with Darwin's idea about beards, it actually supports it. If nakedness became a signal of health and attractiveness, then a face that deliberately keeps its hair, especially hair that only shows up at sexual maturity, becomes an even louder signal. It's contrast. A beard only reads as a beard because it's surrounded by bare skin. Remove the contrast and the whole display stops working. There's a third piece of this that rarely makes it into the popular explanation, and it comes from anthropologist Nina Jablonski, whose research usually focuses on skin pigmentation but overlaps heavily with why humans lost body hair to begin with. Her work points out that hair loss and the explosion of sweat glands likely happened alongside, and partly because of, changes in skin pigmentation. As hair thinned and skin was exposed to more direct sun, darker, more melanin-rich skin would have become necessary to protect against UV damage and folate breakdown. That means the story of human hairlessness isn't just about temperature or attraction in isolation. It's a whole cascade, cooling pressures favoring less fur, that exposing more skin to sun-pressuring pigmentation to change. And somewhere inside all of that, certain patches of hair sticking around because they'd started doing social and sexual work that plain skin couldn't do on its own. Put those three threads together and a much fuller picture starts to form, even if it's still not a complete answer. Losing most of your fur probably began as a practical adaptation for a hot climate and a hunting strategy built on endurance rather than speed. But once bodies were mostly bare skin itself started to carry new meaning, signaling health, youth, fertility. And in that new visual landscape, a few remaining patches of hair, the ones tied to hormones and sexual maturity, took on an outsized role. The beard wasn't left behind by accident. It may have survived precisely because everything around it disappeared. Here's what nobody can fully resolve yet, though. Nobody can say for certain how much of the beard's persistence is Darwin's sexual attraction, how much is Dixon's dominance signaling, and how much is just genetic drift, random chance that happened to stick because it didn't cost early humans much to keep it. Traits like this rarely have one clean cause. They usually have 3 or 4 forces pulling in a similar direction at once, reinforcing each other over tens of thousands of years, and by the time you're standing in front of a mirror deciding whether to shave, you're looking at the accumulated result of all of it at once, without any of the history attached. Which is honestly true of a lot more than facial hair. Most of what your body does automatically, the way you flush when you're embarrassed, the way your voice deepens at puberty, the way certain features draw the eye without you consciously choosing to look, carries the same kind of layered evolutionary logic. Practical pressure, social signaling, and simple chance, all stacked on top of each other so thoroughly that by the time it reaches you, it just feels like the way things are. So next time you're standing at the sink, razor in hand, trying to decide whether to grow it out or shave it clean, it's worth remembering what that decision actually is. It's not really about grooming. It's you, weighing in on an argument your own body's been having with itself for 200,000 years and still hasn't settled.